Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles, Director of Partnerships here at Sweetfish Media. I am joined today by Jeff Kupietzky. He is the CEO of PowerInbox. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Logan. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for joining us. Jeff, excited to dive into today's topic. Before we do that, I would love for you to share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and what the team at PowerInbox are up to these days.
Sure. I'm the CEO. I've been with the organization about 7 years. We actually came up with this product idea just over 4 years ago. And what we do is we provide a digital monetization solution for publishers and marketers to leverage the reach of email in order to acquire new customers. So think if you have a newsletter, you can actually put advertising in that on behalf of other folks, or you can advertise inside newsletters. And we'll talk a little more about why that's very exciting.
I love it. So, Jeff, I appreciate the background. Let's dive right into today's topic. We're going to be talking about some of the limitations of certain social platforms and specific opportunities with both email as well as push notifications. And I think a great place to start is some of the points I know you wanted to touch on as far as limited reach these days on Facebook. Tell us a little bit about what you guys have seen on that platform, specifically change here in recent memory.
Sure. And we work with a lot of digital marketing folks who have been leveraging their ability to acquire traffic through Facebook. And what they're sharing with us is there's been a sea change in terms of what Facebook is now allowing folks to advertise on their platform, how much data they have access to, and ultimately, how much control does a marketer have over the users that they acquire. Because of some of the items that Facebook was involved with, they've become much more stringent now on deciding what's considered a legitimate ad or even a legitimate area of interest to advertise on. And we find from talking to folks is that can limit greatly what people do in terms of using Facebook as a way to acquire end users. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, if I can just add, if they are receiving traffic from Facebook, they're being squeezed a different way because Facebook more and more controls how much traffic a site is getting. And if they used to rank high, they can rank lower now based on where Facebook puts them in the feed. So if you're receiving traffic or acquiring traffic, both ways you might be getting squeezed now if you're relying solely on Facebook for your traffic.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the flip side there too, I know I've seen you mention, Jeff, users are becoming more suspicious of content on Facebook. So there's kind of another squeeze coming into play there as well, right?
Exactly. There's this lack of trust that users continue to kind of get stronger in terms of their view of what they see on Facebook. And so if you're a brand trying to kind of create trust with end users, if the medium you're doing in is being controlled by a social media network, it's not really giving you the control over your brand that you probably want. And that's having an impact on people's ability to successfully acquire new users.
hmm I think that segues this really nicely, Jeff, into this next point I know you wanted to talk about, in where email is different on both of those 2 points, both the control and the trust by subscribers. Tell us a little bit about what you guys have been seeing marketers experience in that area.
Yeah, and as everyone knows, email is not a new channel, but I think people are rediscovering some of the reasons why it's lasted so long, and it's seen by many as the workforce among the marketing channels. First off, it's direct. So a publisher or kind of a marketer has a direct relationship with the end user. Nobody can disintermediate that. There's no Google or Facebook or Apple in between that relationship. It's cross-device and persistent. So a user can access using their email address many different ways to reach a brand, but you can identify that user across all those different channels. From the point of view of the marketer, they can control that relationship, meaning that they have that direct ownership with the end user, and they can determine the pace and frequency by which they use that channel to reach out to those end users. And so kind of having that ability where the user both trusts it more, has given more permission to kind of receive messages, and then the brand's ability to control that puts them in a much stronger ability then to influence what messaging and the actions that those users are being asked to take.
It's story time, and this growth story is about search engine marketing. Okay, so the story revolves around eSub, a project management SaaS company specifically for subcontractors. Even though eSub had incredible customer retention, they struggled with growth. Being a niche service, they discovered that there was little demand expressed for their solutions within search engines. To take on this challenge, eSub hired Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. After refining targeting, pre-qualifying clicks with an ad copy, and developing custom landing pages, Directive was able to increase eSub's marketing qualified leads by 71%, while decreasing their cost per lead by 65%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Mm-hmm. So that makes a lot of sense. And I know the next thing you wanted to touch on, Jeff, was, push notifications and the opportunity there as a new channel. Tell us a little bit about how that ties in with what you're talking about there on the email side.
Sure. So again, email is very strong because of the strong relationship that the end user has with the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great mechanism for people to both advertise and kind of solicit, if they will, their goods and services. What we're seeing is if you are somebody that then looks at what is the next emerging platform where you have that same relationship with an end user, you can control the frequency and pace. It's a direct connection with them. We're seeing push notifications being very similar to email. And what that is if your website asks somebody to allow notifications through a browser, that could be either done on desktop or on mobile,
Mm-hmm.
that the end users are now being able to kind of receive information that you push out, even if they're not browsing on your website. So the real advantage of that is, let's say you don't necessarily have them sign up for an email and they visit your site once, they might want to receive future notifications from you. And it's another way to then access that user, again, even if they're not necessarily on your website at that moment. And that platform we're finding is a very rich place both to engage with that audience or potentially advertise if it's not your audience, but you'd like to acquire that traffic from that channel. And again, as somebody who creates a network among people that have the traffic and those who are looking to advertise, we find it to be very valuable for people playing in that to
Mm-hmm.
take advantage of this emerging source of traffic.
Yeah, I've noticed that more frequently just browsing different sites, both, as you mentioned, both on desktop and on mobile, seeing, hey, do you want to opt in to push notifications? I've steadily seen an increase there. Tell us a little bit about some of the recommendations you guys make, Jeff, in what you've seen in effective use of push notifications in personalization, some of the things marketers should be thinking about as they look at this new trend.
Sure. So first of all, what's great, and I'm going to link it again back to email, is Push is another platform that can take advantage of a unique identifier like a hashed email address, because we can track what an end user is showing interest in and then only show them the content that they're going to be most interested in. It's a platform that allows for true personalization. so every user can see the content that we would believe is most relevant to that individual.
Mm-hmm.
As we mentioned, it also is a place that the publisher or the sender can be fully in control of how often the user sees that content. And many folks are actually finding that that's an opportunity to even potentially monetize that relationship by putting targeted advertisements.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have your own content being pushed to the user, or it can be third-party content that the owner of that relationship can get paid for.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the differences you guys have seen, Jeff, in what you use as the unique identifier, email or device or cookie-based targeting?
Yeah, so the old way that most advertising worked was cookies. We identify the computer through something that you kind of dropped in through the browser session. And that works great if it's kind of a very, very arm's length, not very detailed kind of understanding of the user's behavior. Some of the challenges of that is that it doesn't work on most mobile devices. If two people share the same computer, think husband and wife, then you're going to end up confusing the two. And it doesn't really scale across the fact that people today use more than one device on a regular basis. We've been, really seeing and kind of articulating is that by using a persistent identifier like an email address that allows a user to be identified cross-device, that stays with that user, and it's really a unique identity. It's not something we know who they are. We just know that it's unique. That allows you to then tie that user's interaction with your content across any type of platform. So the scenario would be you might notice that email address opening up your content in email. You might be able to link that now to actually seeing that same user open up a push notification or even potentially on the website. And creating an identity graph that's linked to that unique email address allows for a much richer understanding of what the user is interested in. And then for the marketer, it makes it much more easy to then target that user with relevant and specific messaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Jeff, for marketers listening to this, are there any specific tips that you found in the type of content for push notifications versus display ads and other media types that we've talked about here and others that they're using? Have you found any specific things that you recommend since this is kind of a new growing area, content and what we put in front of users really needs to be optimized for the given medium. Any lessons there that you guys have seen as this trend continues to grow in the push notification area?
Yeah, and it's part of a larger trend of moving from just showing a product, a typical display experience, to telling a story, which is what people call a native ad or a content type ad. And what push allows you to do is kind of interest somebody in the beginning part of that story. And then when the user clicks, they can kind of then get engaged with a much longer format. So if you're again, trying to acquire traffic, and you have a story to tell about your product or service, it's sometimes very hard to communicate that through a typical kind of flat display, which is usually just an image. But having both the image and content, and then leading somebody through a set of screens that then tells more of that story, we find is a much more accurate way to help an end user understand the value proposition and be interested in learning more. And so this shift that we're seeing where people are kind of responding more to native advertising works very well on a push platform where you get a very limited real estate. And so you really want that kind of image to be very relevant and engaging. And so combining a native format on the push platform, we find is a real winner. And it speaks to everybody coming up now with ways to tell their story as opposed to just putting a picture of a product.
I love it. Jeff, this has been some great advice to give to folks. I love what you're breaking down there in this growing area of push notifications. If anybody listening to this would like to follow up, ask any questions of you, or learn more about what you and the team at PowerInbox are doing these days, what would be the best way for them to go about doing that?
Sure. We'd love to hear from them. Obviously, they can visit our website, which is www.powerinbox.com. We have an email alias for any kind of inquiries. It would just be sayhello@powerinbox.com. And frankly, I'd be very interested to engage with any of the folks in the audience directly. I can be found on LinkedIn, or I could be emailed directly at jeff@powerinbox.com. And I'd love to hear from any of the listeners directly.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you so much for being a great guest on the show and sharing your knowledge with our listeners today.
It's my pleasure.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know, all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.